Thank you, Sam. Very interesting talk. Our next panelist is Brad Lipps. Brad is the CEO of the Atlas Network, which is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., that strengthens the worldwide freedom movement. Atlas connects and provides services to more than 400 free market organizations in 90 countries. Prior to joining Atlas in 1998, Brad worked on Wall Street with an internet startup and as a music journalist. He received an MBA from Guazetta Business School, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of Emory University, and a BA from Princeton University. And he co-authored The Reagan Vision, published by the Goldwater Institute in 2004, and has contributed chapters to Freedom Champions, published by Atlas in 2011, and articles to the American Thinker and Real Clear Policy. Brad was also one of the original founders of Yeah Right, a libertarian-oriented blog on popular culture, which was where I first got to know him when I was also a contributor to the site. So please welcome Brad.
All right, well, thank you, Larry. And thank you to Liberty 21 for organizing this. It's a treat to be in Hillsdale, and I probably speak on behalf of all the panelists that were here because this is an interesting question, and I think an increasingly recognized as a very important question for us. I definitely go along with the conventional wisdom now that if conservatives are ever going to elect a governing majority again, we need to make some inroads in reclaiming the culture, as Larry and Sam have put it. We need to find a way into the hearts of those, they're calling them the low information voters, who know a lot more about how Barack Obama has done with his NCAA brackets last month than they know about what he's doing to the healthcare system going forward. And I've come tonight thinking about what I can contribute to this conversation. I figured I'd start with a little bit of a confession. So I come to you as a recovering low information voter. If we went back in a time machine some 20 years, I would not be like our diligent students here occupying these seats. The people that would be in those seats would be worrying about me as one of those examples of, the college student drifting off into brain-dead liberalism during their college days. And like a low information voter, I will deny any responsibility for this, and I will blame the culture because I think there's something to it. As long as I've been alive, the left has just saturated the entertainment world. We've got Clint Eastwood, but it would be nice if we had our own, Lena Durham or J-Lo or anybody that's under 82 years old. It's, I do think not having cultural icons matters, and I was thinking about my poor dad, who really did everything right. I graduated high school. I knew the Laffer curve. I had this sense of why free enterprise worked and why government programs tended to fail. But I drifted during college, and it's kind of strange that I sort of vividly remember the night that I intentionally kind of crossed over into this weird socialist land. I was in an indie rock club in Hoboken, New Jersey, watching a band called the Mekons, who were wonderful, but hardcore socialists. I remember just feeling this really intense solidarity with everyone else that was there on the floor of that club that night. And these are the kind of people that I'm sure were out there in England this past week, defaming Margaret Thatcher in the worst way, because that night, Thatcher's prime minister tenure had just come to a close, and that's what we were all celebrating. And I remember, as they were kind of doing a rah-rah socialism thing, I remember in my mind thinking to myself, it doesn't really matter that it doesn't work. I want to kind of live by my ideals. My ideals tell me that there's a world where it should work, and I want to be part of that world. And it's just so embarrassing to admit, but I know that's exactly what I was thinking. And I think that same kind of nonchalance is just out there in the electorate, where there's a disregard for what actually works, and political affinities are really drawn based on, how do you feel about yourself as a Democrat or as a Republican? Do you have a sense that you're in the cool club or not? It's sort of the reduction of policy matters to fashion. And I think that's a tough place for us. It's at the core of our problems. I've been thinking since I got this invitation about what we're supposed to do in light of that. And one thing I think we need to rule out is changing what we stand for. There's a lot of hemming and hawing about how to recraft the conservative message, but at least on sort of the big picture of limiting government, reducing spending, trying to liberate the forces of the private sector, we can't turn back. I can understand if you're a political hack, how you might be thinking about the next election and saying, hey, that Paul Ryan stuff, that can be easily demagogue. We shouldn't be going there. But if you're not a political hack, and if you're in this because you believe in it ideologically, there's no turning back. We have to stand for what's right. We have to think about the long game. And I'm as confident about this as anything I know, which is that there will be a reckoning for the left when the day comes when everyone starts to realize that the welfare state that they built cannot be sustained. And we have to just continue to fight that battle and not shirk away from our ideals on that one. One of the books that was passed out, called After the Welfare State, sort of drives this point home. This is a book that my organization published last year to really talk, especially for young people, about what you should know about the entitlement state that is just stacked against you. So I think the left will face a reckoning, but we can't be content with just waiting for a moment of vindication when the debt crisis comes. There may have been a guy on the Titanic running around saying, I told you, more boats would have helped out. But, if we're going to actually save our country, we need to speed up the process of being vindicated. And I think there are reasons to be optimistic. I think that when Sam was talking about the unsettled culture, he was alluding to the point that I wanted to make, which is basically that all of Andrew Breitbart's intuitions, I think, were right. That the left has dominated certain institutions with incredible cultural power, basically monopolized them for a generation or more, and that power is quickly dissipating. I toyed with the idea of trying to put together sort of fancy graphs to make this point, but I think that they'd be tough to draw, and I think you can visualize them in your head. I was going to do one just saying, ways to get your voices heard, and I think the trend line would be pointing straight up. And there'd be one that would say, the cultural power of the mainstream media, trending down. Cultural power of the unions, the environmentalists, all going straight down. And with it, I think this is simultaneously occurring with a very important event, which is sort of the baby boomers becoming uncool, which is, I've been waiting for this for so long, and I think it's finally happening. I think that the boomers themselves sort of cemented in this idea that what is cool is defined by 20-year-olds or people in their 20s, and I would expect that your generation, Hillsdale kids, as you come into your 20s, that you and your peers are not going to be happy about this situation of paying into retirement programs that are funding the golf games of folks in Florida, while you realize they are bankrupting the systems that you're never going to benefit from. Christopher Buckley wrote a novel, sort of a dark comedy, a couple years ago, maybe more than that, called Boomsday. And it was about the day when a very opportunistic politician comes to realize that pandering for the votes of retirees no longer gets you as many votes as pandering to those who felt oppressed. They were the ones doing the hard work to sustain these retirees' lifestyles. And in fact, they'd much rather see those retirees euthanized. And I want to be very clear, I'm not saying we should go there. But I think that your generation has the opportunity to get rid of this 60s worship that I grew up with, sort of in the shadow of, which I think has really undermined sort of the traditional faith in a lot of America's virtues. I was thinking about if I actually have recommendations on how to do this, and I kind of paused and realized that it is those in their 20s that are going to be the creative forces behind this. So just take my suggestions as for what they will be. The hard work is going to be done by the rising generation. The three observations I came up with begins with this. I'm kind of wary sometimes. We sometimes talk about the need for overtly conservative, overtly libertarian culture. And there's so many, I've been sent so many songs over the years as an old music journalism guy of people with songs about Ludwig von Mises and things that are just, they're so clunky and horrible. And it's not that I think that our side's overtly political art is more clunky than their side. I think it's all clunky and horrible. Where we really lose the game is in how people talk about popular culture. I think it's the music reviewers, the movie reviewers, people doing all the soft interviews, the Katie Courics out there. They're the ones that have sort of that subtle, progressive spin on things, and that's where I think we lose the game. Glenn Reynolds of the blog Instapundit has recommended that all those folks that poured millions of dollars into the Romney campaign and all the related PACs, they should have just bought Cosmo or other women's magazines. think that would be a much more cost-effective way to get the message out. You just leave 90% of the content exactly as it is, but there's that 10% that kind of undermines our message and that does this kind of fawning over leftist ideals, and that's really at the heart of our problems. I was thinking about it, and I don't want to encourage any of you to aspire to be like an anchor on an E-channel show. Your parents would hate me, but I think we need to all pay more attention to how we can try to change the tenor of what you might call, the soft news. The second thing I wanted to bring up is just, we need more humor and more ridicule, I'd say. A couple years ago, there was a really nice documentary done by friends at the Moving Picture Institute. It was about the fall of communism and the role that jokes played in undermining sort of the moral authority of the communist hegemony, essentially. As soon as people started to joke about it, there's a movie called Hammer and Tickle, and it's pretty well done. But there's a point there, just like when people stop revering institutions that they used to feel intimidated by, you start to make that progress. And I feel like there's so much in modern liberalism here in the U.S. that needs to be joked about. That's why Joan is such a asset for the movement. He does it better than anybody. Thinking about the paternalism of Mayor Bloomberg, just the whole trend towards a nanny state. It's ridiculous. How can young people stand for being told what size soda they can drink? Sandra Fluke becoming an icon based on wanting other people to buy her birth control pills. And I love the stuff that James O'Keefe has done to expose hypocrisies within the gun control crowd and beyond. So I think that there's a lot of fertile ground out there, and we just need to go after it with humor and with cultural confidence. The last point I'll make, we also need cultural confidence to just reclaim the moral high ground. And one suggestion I'd have is not to forget international examples that play to our strengths. And this is where I have a little bit of expertise. The organization that I run gets to work with freedom activists and freedom think tanks all over the world, 90 different countries. And I was thinking about when I first got involved with Atlas, I had kind of found my way back to the books that my dad always wanted me to read. So I'd come back to the argument, he forgave me of all my sins. When I first came to an Atlas event, I realized that not only do we need to win the arguments, we need to win hearts. And I had this aha moment at that first conference. There was a guy from Africa, and he was talking about how foreign aid has all these negative effects. Many of you in the audience already know this, but this was an epiphany for me, just to think about how local agriculture markets are totally undermined by dumping foreign aid and free food in the middle of these destitute spots where those who are actually trying to solve the problem suddenly have all the incentives thrown out of whack. He said, do you know what happens to the best students in the colleges in the college I grew up going to? They didn't become doctors. They didn't go on to create jobs of their own private businesses. He said, they wound up as drivers for World Bank bureaucrats because there's this incredible aid infrastructure, and all those guys want to drive around with good English speakers. So they're being recruited, with nice salaries to sit around in cars on the side of the road all day. So hearing that righteous indignation, using another Breitbart term, from people that I'm sure my lefty friends at Princeton thought, that they were championing, hearing them reflect our ideas just really changed my outlook. Excuse me. So I'll really end there. I think we need to tell these stories, reframe the debate, claim the moral high ground, and really stake a claim to it. Thank you.